Greetings and good evening, fellow TIs. In an era of hyper coordination between public agencies and community groups, the line between genuine emergency response and orchestrated targeting has blurred. This speech that I'm going to share explores how constructed crisis architecture, a system of false flags, community mobbing, and identity based manipulation is utilized to simulate threats, justify surveillance, and suppress dissent. The building blocks of a constructed crisis is what I want to talk about. These operations often rely on a predictable set of components, such as community mobbing via civic groups, neighborhood watch groups, HOAs, local civic groups are also weaponized at times to isolate individuals through rumor campaigns, exclusion, and coordinated complaints based on lies because they're partners with the federal agency, contractor, or certain member of law enforcement, which is abusing the situation at times. These groups often act as the eyes and ears of interagency partners, feeding false narratives that justify escalation. False reporting methods through emergency management do exist, and these loopholes exist through the strategic use of 911 calls, wellness checks, and anonymous tips to like ICE, which can trigger emergency protocols without evidence. When repeated, these tactics create a paper trail that paints the target as unstable or dangerous. It's a form of bureaucratic gaslighting. Law enforcement, mental health services, and emergency management teams may operate under shared threat agreements or models. Once a target is flagged, even minor incidents can be interpreted through a lens of suspicion, reinforcing the false narrative. One of the more disturbing patterns is the use of gendered and identity based actors, particularly women that are LGBT, the transgender community. Sometimes these roles are designed to provoke people. You're surveilling and trying to entrap a male, and you're doing this in large groups in every state. You're being documented on video that you come from a fusion center, a CIA contractor, InfraGard. These activities raise critical questions. Why are identity protected groups used to target males? And does this dynamic exploit social taboos to prevent male self defense or public sympathy? Could this pattern indicate a psychological warfare tactic designed to trigger an emotional response? I believe so. While these actors may be unaware of their role in a broader operation, their deployment often correlates with escalation. When somebody's eating with their 90-year-old grandmother, they're taking a walk or watching a movie. So these activities often correlate with escalation. And the reason why I say this, because when the male target resists and questions these people and documents these people's activities, I feel that these activities could lead to an issue. Rather than preventing violence, these tactics may increase the likelihood of conflict by creating no-win scenarios where any response by the target is framed as aggression, using social camouflage to obscure the power dynamics at play, triggering emotional exhaustion and harming the person's reputation. This inversion, where the supposed protectors become provocateurs, demands scrutiny. If emergency management systems can be hijacked for covert targeting, then ethical automation of civic transparency must become central to reform. crisis architecture, let me go back, no, constructed crisis architecture is not a conspiracy theory. It's a pattern that's observed through public records, behavioral analysis, and my experiences, which have been documented. By naming its components and questioning its logic, we move from passive awareness to active resistance.
See, one of the most insidious tactics utilized in targeting is the weaponization of the term investigation as a cover for harassment. And here is how it typically plays out. This is how harassment gets masked as an investigation. Agencies or private actors claim they are conducting an investigation, which is criminal or perhaps civil or administrative. But the real goal is intimidation, disruption, or psychological pressure. Under the false guises of community policing, public engagement, community engagement, and so on. Sometimes this involves fusion center coordination. Surveillance is being framed as public safety or threat assessment, but it often involves unmarked vehicles, tags which are obscured, behavioral mirroring, presence signaling. Like, let's say you're parked at a lake and all the cars are parked forward, facing the lake. They may park sideways. And versus facing the lake, they're pointed right at you, looking right at you. And they may do it for years. They also utilize mutual aid and private contractors because by invoking mutual aid agreements, agencies can deploy personnel and vehicles from outside jurisdictions, including private firms, without triggering local oversight. So police won't even know about it. So there's no formal charges or no paper trail because it's supposedly an investigation. So there's no arrest, no warrant, and in most cases, there's no record by police because they conceal crimes committed by people that are under a mutual aid agreement because they have immunity. So I want to talk about why this tactic is effective and why it's dangerous. See, it legally shields these investigations, and actually they're not even investigations, they're harassment campaigns. They're exempt from public records, they're exempt from disclosure, so it makes it impossible to figure out what is going on. The target is made to feel like they're being watched, followed, and gaslit without any support. So they're being socially isolated. Sometimes these perps will go to block watch captains, they'll use Citizens Corps and other partners. So if you're experiencing this, you want to have a body camera which timestamps everything. And there's a bunch of them. Bob Love has really great body cameras, and they typically last about 5 years. So make sure that you get something which is timestamped, meaning that when you're recording, it's leaving the date and the time of the incident. You also want to stay grounded because these tactics are designed to provoke a reaction. So document everything. There is credible evidence and documentation that fusion centers, Citizens Corps programs, and federal agencies like the CIA, FBI, and Army have engaged in coordinated activities based on mobbing and systematic harassment, which present pre-terrorism indicators on par with 9/11. And it's being masked as an investigation or community safety initiative, and so on. These operations are often concealed and require a memoranda of understanding, also known as a MOU, or mutual aid compacts, which allow cross-agency collaboration with minimal oversight. So when you deal with groups like Citizens Corps, you may deal, like in Texas, with the Northern Command. You may deal with people that have training in psychological warfare. And guess what they do? They'll bring their children. They'll bring their wife. and they may harass you in a store and dress in all black. You may have people walking by your house every hour of the day wearing all black, and they may come from a fusion center. They may come from DOJ's Citizens on Patrol and different groups. This activity increased after 9/11, but it was occurring prior. So many of these activities are based on behavioral surveillance, geofencing and mobile tracking, stingray technology, coordination with private contractors, and even media firms. I dealt with one, I think her name was Randy Bram. Her last name is Brahm, and she works for Zeta Holdings Inc. And you'll notice these people will work at companies which are registered as a foreign company. And the reason why is because they'll go to like Delaware and register there. So a lot of these activities are being framed as community policing or volunteer safety networks. So they'll frame it as if they're doing neighborhood watch, and they'll enlist civilians to monitor the targets and even mob them. So that way it creates deniable plausibility for this harassment. These groups may be activated under mutual aid agreements and MOUs with law enforcement, allowing them to operate without formal accountability. The CIA, FBI, and even Army have been behind some of these activities in some communities.
Hello, fellow targeted individuals. In every single state that I've lived in, I've experienced targeting, and some of these pictures are concerning groups that I've experienced targeting from. And I'm not saying they're all bad, because that's not the case. Many are filled with good men and women. But anytime a federal agency gives people a contract or requests mutual aid, their partners will support their interagency partners versus your constitutional rights. They don't want to hear what you have to say, only what their partners have to say. So for that reason, you may be harassed in stores by a sheriff association partner, some member of a civic group, some group that's trying to rehabilitate druggies, or a regional council. And the FBI, they tried to drive Ernest Hemingway to a state where he was mad. They were all the time harassing him. And they're using veterans. This is no joke. There are veterans which are being utilized to target people. Targeting often begins when oppressors feel powerless in their own lives. By isolating and destabilizing others, they try to reclaim a sense of control or meaning. But this inversion, seeking hope through someone else's despair, creates a cycle of spiritual theft. The targeted individual may feel hopeless, not just from the attacks, but from the realization that their suffering is being used as a fuel. It's a parasitic dynamic. The oppressor feeds on the light of the oppressed, hoping to escape their own darkness. There is a special kind of evil in those who oppress the innocent, not out of fear, but out of greed, control, and malice. When a person knows their target poses no threat, yet chooses to terrorize them anyway, it reveals a heart corrupted by power and a mind divorced from conscience. This is not justice, it is cowardice masquerading as strength. To harm the harmless is to declare war on truth itself. But truth endures, and every act of injustice, domination, plants the seed of resistance. The oppressed may be silenced for a moment, but the moral arc of history bends towards their vindication. Let us stand with those who suffer, not because they are weak, but because they are right.